Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Some Drivel, a series of podcasts exploring tangents with awesome humans. And speaking of awesome humans, it is my absolute privilege to be joined today by Nan McNamara, a prolific voice actress and, of course, on-camera actress as well, who you may recognize her dulcet tones from a little game called Gears of War, which I believe now, correct me if I'm wrong, Nan, you've appeared in 4 of those games. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and there's a new version coming out, a prequel coming out next year. So I
Yes, and
may, I may or may not be in that. I'm not sure if I should say anything, so just
well, I mean,
maybe.
all I was going to say, you've helped me beautifully with my segue there, which is that I'm obviously wanting to address. I think fundamentally, a lot of people will recognize your voice and your performance from the Gears of War franchise as Anya. And for me, I think it was always interesting, certainly from a player's perspective, how, initially she was presented as sort of like she was creating a compression a bit on the character. She was creating a bit of a challenge for the main character. And of course, as your relationship with Marcus Phoenix evolved, we then see, for those of you that haven't played the game, there may be spoilers in this interview, but we see obviously how their relationship evolves over the course of the franchise. And I was
Yes.
curious, just certainly from you as from an actor's perspective, have there been moments in your career, much like how Anya did sort of present that sometimes that pressure on the characters and her involvement in the game, have you felt as an actress the pressure sometimes to sort of conform to perhaps a director's vision or to pick a certain choice that perhaps goes against your instincts as an actor?
That's a great question. I think as an actor, you always are collaborating. So if
Right.
a director has a vision for something that you may not have, my first instinct would be to, you know, chat about it,
Right.
talk
Okay. So it
about it.
begins with communication. That's
I
the
think so. Some directors like, and I'm sort of this way too, rather than talking, they just say, show me what you think,
okay. Right.
which is a really lovely way to work because then, maybe there's a piece of it that will work, and maybe there's a piece of it that the director wants, and you can combine the two together. But by and large, the actor's sense of empathy is where everything comes from. And so being able to put myself in somebody else's shoes is that's everything. So to the extent that the director doesn't agree with how I see that, he or she may be providing me with something that I hadn't even thought of. So it's always good to say yes first, just like in
Yeah.
improv. Say yes, see what happens. If it still doesn't feel right, any director worth their salt is going to say, let's keep exploring. Let's keep
Right.
seeing what's happening until it feels good for both of us. And that's really, I think, the best way to collaborate with
That's really
people.
interesting because I think that fundamentally, I think for particularly for a lot of young actors, the barrier for them is risk taking. Is they sort of
Yes.
feel like sort of inhibited from making mistakes because obviously they're sort of it's the sort of fear of public failure, the fear of judgment, and which are
Yes.
all logical human anxieties that one might feel, especially in a creative space. But it's
Mhm.
is that something you think that you feel like you've in terms of your technique and your process, do you feel like you've afforded yourself that certain level of comfort now in your career that you feel sort of empowered to then take those chances?
I think that's something I always struggle with. I think most
Right.
actors, and even now in this age of social media and the internet and wanting to get it right, we are so quick to rush to let me Google that. Let me see what that is, as
Right.
opposed to sitting with something, which is uncomfortable. You sort of alluded to that in the question. It is uncomfortable to make it messy. So
Right.
it's definitely something that I check myself on and make sure when I'm starting something, especially, hey, this is going to get messy. It's not going to be great. And just, throw up and then just move on and
Yeah.
keep pushing through it. But it's so important because art cannot, in my opinion, this is going to sound very hoity-toity, but it can't, you can't create art with perfection. Art is not about that.
Yeah, sort
It's
of
about getting
fundamentally,
messy.
it's the flaws, isn't it? That sometimes
Yeah.
like I've described them sometimes as like happy accidents. Sometimes something
Yes.
perhaps sort of it deviated from the script or perhaps the intention that a director might have given you, but the notion that actually through that exploration you go, oh, I've stumbled on something I never expected, but actually that was weirdly the better choice for this scene or this moment.
Yes.
And I think, and
Yes.
that's where I was curious, particularly with something like Gears. It's this. it's this big mega franchise that obviously now has an enormous legacy. You mentioned, of course, with Gears of War, E-Day obviously cooking up potentially for sort of at least the next sort of within the next couple of years.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I wondered because you're working not as part of an independent team. This is the coalition. They're a first party Microsoft studio. It's a big proposition. Do you or have you felt in the past that that sort of, despite the sort of big studio machine that you're working for there, that you were afforded some semblance of ownership over Anya and the
Oh,
process?
yes, for sure. For sure. I remember the first session that I had, it was very much here's what Anya is being drawn like. It hadn't become what it is now, of course.
Right.
They were
Yeah.
still they were still creating the actual game part of it, but there definitely are things that are background that they share with you, but they're very open to your interpretation of how you
Nice.
see that, or they wouldn't have cast you. But I will say it's very it can be difficult because you're not working with the other actors. When you do a
Right.
video game, they're not in the studio. You're in the studio by yourself. And so sometimes you're acting with a scratch track of somebody who's not even the final actor, or you'll hear, like I'll hear Marcus and what the actor who plays Marcus has recorded, but he won't be in the room. So,
Right.
so there
Okay.
is that sort of restriction to it, and a lot of times they have the images ahead of time, so you have to kind of match, to a certain extent, what the action is. So
Mm.
there are challenges with that, but it's a great team. All the iterations of it from when it was epic to
Mm.
to now have been just fantastic. They're
That's
great
really
folks.
that's really lovely to hear, but also interesting to talk about like the notion that you don't necessarily like, especially if it's placeholder dialogue, that can be really tricky, I think, especially if it's an emotional back and forth to respond to
Yes,
something that isn't actually the line read that's going to be in the scene to kind of
right,
tonally match that, right? That must be a really
right.
sort of tricky balancing act. But also when I've seen various sort of like behind the scenes of things like Pixar films and things like
Mhm.
that, where often like especially with the Toy Story films, they would often have the actors present. They would have it almost theater style. They'd have
Right.
themselves all set up so they could have that rapport. But obviously, logistically, that must be incredibly complex, much like a live action project to try and sync up and get everyone
Yes.
on site. So is there a certain practical reality to that? The idea of you being solo and in a booth by yourself, so that quite simply it can be recorded and done.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And I think it also affords both sides for the actor and the production team, doing multiple takes of something. So, let's say it's a particularly, like a battle scene, something like that. You can change the intent to make
Mm,
it stronger, to make it more dire, to make it and give them multiple takes on something.
right.
Whereas if everybody was there, the time to do that would be a little bit trickier, I think. So, but it
Yeah.
is challenging. It's definitely a challenge. Now, having done Anya for so many years, I come into it with knowing who she is, knowing who I am as Anya.
Right.
But
Yeah.
for newer characters, I'm sure that is even a little bit more challenging.
Well, yeah, because I suppose you don't have the backstory of your own making your own performance to draw
Yes.
on there, right? Especially that first
Yes.
game. This was in many ways I'm a huge gaming nerd, so I love all this kind of stuff. So I know what Gears of War meant to the brand, to Microsoft and the company at the time. It was their sort of big gambit after Halo.
Yes.
So it's
Yes.
certainly for it to have sort of ballooned in the way that it did over such, in
Yeah.
relative terms, quite a short period of time. It wasn't like
Yeah.
it kind of went from 0 to 60, right? So
Right.
that did you have while you were doing it, did you have any sense of the anticipation? Was the sort of like excitement that was drummed up and especially as the series went on, are you aware of that? Have you been sort of around convention circuit or seen like Comic Cons or anything like that? Has that crossed your
Yeah.
radar?
Not really. Certainly not for the first game.
Okay.
When I started getting sent, one of the producers of the game sent me one of the guns.
No way.
Yes, I have one. I
With the
have one of,
chainsaw
yes,
lancer.
yes, the whole
Amazing.
thing. So then I started to think, okay, something is happening here. And then
Yeah.
I think it was either two or three. They did a midnight launch here in Los Angeles
Yeah.
at a mall. Remember malls? I don't know if they still have malls
Sure. Yeah, we have
in London, but
in a very sort of British way, shopping centers.
yes,
That's
shopping
our
centers.
naturally.
So they did in Century City, they did a midnight launch. And, not that I'm not up at midnight, but do I want to go somewhere and be ready to
Of
do
course.
something at midnight? But when it was like, oh no, you have to be there and we're going to send a car and you're going to get picked. And I was like,
It's like a
oh, this is,
whole
yeah, it
commitment.
was a whole thing. It was a whole thing.
Okay.
So,
Is
so
that
that's
so
fun.
I have something really sort of slightly surreal to share with you. So I my first job before I became a teacher and obviously doing Burly Media, I my first job was at a record store here in England. It's a franchise called HMV, His Master's Voice.
Okay.
It's got a legacy dating back to the 1930s where they used to sell vinyl records and
Wow.
now continue to do so. They still persist. They have an Oxford Street store. It's still popular to this day. And when I was, but a young lad, when I was about, I must have been 19, 20, sort of that sort of age. It was one of my first sort of jobs, and they had the particular store that I worked at had a massive games department. It was a record store and they sold films and TV show box sets,
Sure.
but they had a huge games department. And I remember vividly that one of the midnight launches that I did was Gears of War
Oh
3.
my
And
gosh.
I completely hear you, like the fever of fans wanting to come and pick up their special editions,
Yes.
like I
Yes.
totally understand where that comes from. And it is sort of almost a fascinating other world to this side of it,
It
the
it
fandom.
truly is. Yeah.
Yeah.
We also did another one where it was at this place called City Walk, which is connected with Universal Studios, and it was outdoors. And I'm not somebody who is used to that type of thing.
Mm.
I'm not a household name, right? So, I did the interview and my husband was with me and we were walking back to our car and somebody, a dear fan yelled, Miss McNamara. It was like, I was just like, oh, that's me. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, hi. It was just a
What a treat.
very it was such a treat. It was so great to get to see people and talk to people that love the game.
Yeah,
It is
100%.
really, it's
And
thrilling for me to see
it,
how thrilled they are.
well, it's passion, isn't it? It's just passion
Yeah.
in a very sort of focused form. I have to do.
Yes.
I can't. I've been thinking about it the whole time. I have to ask you. You mentioned the Lancer. You have the gun.
Yes,
Mind if I ask where it is? Do you still have it?
I do. I do
No
have
way.
it. I have a little basement, even though I live in Los Angeles and basements are not,
Not a thing, are they? Like in LA?
they're not a thing.
Yeah.
It's actually called a California basement.
Okay. Right.
And yeah, and
Very nice.
I have it down there. Yeah, I
That
have
is
it down
fantastic.
there.
That I can just imagine Thanksgiving. Do you know what I mean? Like I can just see, I can
Yes.
see that. Oh, do you want to check out my Lancer? Just let me just pop down
Well,
here.
I have taken it upstairs to show to a couple of nephews of mine who are
They must have
very
lost
into
their
gears.
mind when they saw that.
They kind of did. Yeah,
I
they
can,
wanted
I
their
can,
picture taken.
I
And
can only imagine if that isn't your social media profile picture, then what are you doing? That is
I should change it to that. You're
just,
absolutely right.
just with the
I should
pose.
pull it out and, get it
100%.
going.
Why not at this point?
Yeah, right.
So obviously, given your sort of association with Gears and
Mhm.
looking, obviously, it's fairly always find it fascinating when I look at actors' IMDb pages and how much I have to scroll, right? When I'm looking through projects and stuff you've been involved
Yes.
with.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really interesting to me to see how much work you've done on things like, Hawaii Five-O, Criminal Minds, but also just the notion of being that sort of, doing the one and done, coming in as a guest actor, having a sort of a
Yes.
complete arc of a character, not in this case across a franchise, across multiple games, but having to do essentially your beginning, middle, end in a 7-day shoot, however long you may have. And
Right.
I was curious in terms of like preparation and time spent. How does that compare to your work on a video game? Is it a little bit more efficient? Is it kind of you go in, the character has a very specific purpose for that particular story, and you're done? Do you find, or equally, conversely, do you actually have a similar process, regardless of whether you're working on a game or a TV show? Do you attack a character in the same way?
That's a great question. I think it's a little different with guest starring on a TV show in that typically if you're a guest star, you're not number one on the call sheet.
Right.
Your character has a function in the story, it has a specific purpose in the
Mm,
story that you need to be aware of and make sure you understand so that you're telling the story correctly. Because when you get on set, very rarely will you get any direction in terms of
oh,
your
interesting.
performance. Yeah, it'll typically be,
Would it be blocking?
certainly
Kind of just like blocking
blocking,
camera.
yeah, blocking
Yeah.
the scene, where you need to land, where your mark is. But you've been cast because what they saw on your tape, or if you were doing it in person, is exactly what they want you to
Mm,
do when you film it.
right.
So the preparation is a little different in that you're completely off book. For the games, you're not off book.
Okay. So
You
that's straight away. That's a huge lead time.
very, very different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any voiceover you're doing, you're going to have the script in front of you.
Nice.
So there's that difference. So it'll be more, I guess I shouldn't say it would be more in your body because even in a video game, I'm
Oh yeah.
standing when I work,
Absolutely.
it's still going to be in my body.
It's going to be physicalized, right? Because I've seen,
Yeah.
I spoke to Joseph Balderrama, who played the Dr. Hakim, the book in It Takes Two. He's also done
Oh,
some work for Matt Reeves' Batman film. He was a small role in,
oh,
and
wow.
he said very interesting actually to hear you speak to this because he said even though it was very much like, and he was working in a home studio booth doing his lines
Yes.
remotely, he
Yes.
still found himself sort of like that the body language was puffed out, and there was a
Oh,
certain
definitely.
like sort of like way he was holding himself in terms of his physicality. So
Right.
that's interesting that despite the fact that you're on book, you're still leveraging those skills, even though obviously the focus is on your vocals.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
absolutely. And of course, when you're doing efforts in particular, efforts being you're killed, you're hit,
right.
you've fallen, you do those all at the end usually of a session because they can really wear on your voice.
Oh, that's interesting. So they
Um,
kind of pace that out for you
yeah, they
because
do.
it can
They
be
do.
like really wearing. So I'm glad you mentioned this because this is a side of voice acting that fascinates me. Is that how do they direct that or even script it? Is it just sort of they give you a flavor of the moment so that they kind of tell you like this is what you're expressing or feeling, give us a noise now? Like what
Yes,
that is that
kind of.
fundamentally it?
Yeah, kind of. It depends on who you're working with. There's a great director that I worked with on Gears, the first three Gears called,
Hmm.
his name is Chris Borders, and he is one of the best directors I've ever had to
Nice.
help you understand how that, um, if you're shot, let's just say you're shot
Hmm.
in the stomach. He's so good at helping you understand, okay, that's great, but remember it's coming from this part of your body rather than that part of your body. He just has a
Wow.
way of describing it that you are able to do it. And he himself can do it. So if you
Right.
still can't quite
Right.
get it, he'll do it for you. You go, oh, okay, good. Because I'm
Also, you can kind of
happy.
like draw from that a little bit.
Yes, exactly. I
That's
know
weirdly specific though. I'm surprised at
it's
how
very
like
specific. Yeah.
yeah, I think I'd kind of maybe again just making an assumption, I suppose, that the idea would just sort of be, I suppose there's an element of it being instinctive. You're given,
Yes.
but then I didn't sort of with the level of specificity of like, oh no, if it's being here, you're going to respond in this way, and
Yes. And
interesting.
either you need more breath on that or you need
Hmm.
more spit or it's more choking or whatever it is.
So much more involved than I thought that would be.
Yeah, or
That's
it needs to be longer. That's great, but can you elongate that sound? So
nice.
yeah, that's a tricky part of it.
Yeah,
And
and
it
very
can
unique
hurt
to
your
video
voice.
games, right? It's such a
Very
unique
unique.
thing
Yes.
because it's not, I don't think, because like you said, you've been hired, you're a hired gun, right? You're coming in to do the gig, hit your mark, say your lines, and that's it. The
Yes.
arc is done. In
Right.
terms of like, is there on that front, on the sort of guest starring roles, do you
Hmm.
tend to gravitate to a character type when things like
Mm.
that come up? Because I'm also that a big thing that's actually been a bit of a through line in some of our interviews before has been around not typecasting, but actors, being drawn to certain roles that they think are within their wheelhouse, not someone telling them this is what you can do and
Sure.
pigeonholing you. Do you tend
Sure.
to gravitate to types of characters? Are they the ones that perhaps catch your attention more if it's an audition side or an opportunity comes your way?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially with theater,
Right.
I tend to lean toward characters who are either fighting for something they're broken people who are fighting to
Right.
redeem themselves. I also tend to play, this is probably more on television,
Mm.
characters that are professionals,
Okay.
lawyers,
Interesting. Okay.
that kind of thing. And then also, actresses of a certain age often will be cast as the weeping mother.
Right.
And and that's a particular skill set that can
For
be
sure.
challenging. Yeah,
Yeah.
but
In
I
terms of
have been
depth as
cast as
well.
that.
That,
What's
yeah,
that?
in terms of depth, like in terms of being able to explore the depth of
Yes.
a character like
Yes,
that.
and being able to on set, I had an experience on a show where the makeup person was getting me ready. It was the last shot of a very long week for them. I was in the last shot. I understood that if we got it quickly, that was my clock. Sorry about that.
That's right.
Understood that if we got it quickly, they would all get to go home. So there was some pressure there.
Okay.
And the scene, the requirement of the scene was for me to cry because my
Okay.
child had been murdered. And so
Oh
the
man, this
makeup
is so high
person,
stakes. This is so,
I
don't
know,
the
right? It's
queue's
like,
what the crew's waiting to wrap
pressure.
like that. Oh my goodness.
So the makeup person who was, putting on my makeup and getting me
Yeah.
ready said, "So are you going to need help?" And I said, "What do you mean? Are you going to need help with the tears?" And he said it very like,
All right,
and
like exasperated. Like kind of okay.
so, yeah, so I said, "Well, what do you tell me what my options are?" Because
Hmm.
I was very curious. And he said, "Well, I can either spray, I forget what it's called, it's a chemical. I'll spray it in your eyes and then you'll tear up. Or we can literally do, like a thing in the corner of your eye that'll
Yeah.
drip down your face." And I just looked at him and I said, "I think I'm going to be okay."
Right. Yeah. Of course.
And so, because I had prepared, I had created the world of this person. And
Yeah.
so sure enough, when we started rolling, when camera started rolling, thank you God, it was there. It was all there. We did it in, I think,
Nice.
maybe one take or two takes, and we were wrapped.
That
So
that makeup person's question there was clearly motivated by the rap. Like
I
that was
think it
that's there's a bit
was
that I felt like that was a little loaded. On face value, one could assume it's, oh well, because we wanted to get the shot.
very helpful. Yeah, we want to make
Absolutely,
sure we
really,
get.
really help you with your process. But actually, that film out like weekend's coming up, so can we
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know
Can we get this going?
just
Yeah,
get this wrapped up?
yeah.
Well, that's I'm glad you mentioned that too because I think so many times I've been faced with students that I teach who are
Yes,
looking for things like audition material, and you mentioned sort of like not just characters you gravitate to, but sometimes the characters that are sort of put in front of you that, like you said, of a certain age or sort of, and often, unfortunately, getting very stereotypical now, but sometimes certain gender can lend
yes,
itself to certain character archetypes, right? And
yes,
what I had a student once, it was a GCSE student, which is sort of our sort of pre-college qualification, and they really sort of frustrated with me because they'd got an audition coming up for the National Youth Theatre, which is a big youth company here in England. And they needed to get a 2 minute monologue, what you'd expect. And every single source that they found of like a 2 minute solo monologue for a young, actress, sort of, teenage kind of age, was one of
yes.
two things. It was either bemoaning the end of a relationship, so sort of some kind of breakup, or they were sort of again, sort of bemoaning again, a slight on their person, like some kind of they had suffered something, some injustice, and it always felt like it
Yes.
was either bemoaning something here about the breakdown of this, or
Right.
weeping their outcast state for something else. And I've to this day I've never forgotten this. The student came to me and said, "Sir, why why is there nothing for me to feel capable?"
Ah, that's a
And
very smart
I, I, I
actress.
mean, 16. I mean, just a remarkably mature thing to say. Why is there nothing for me to feel capable while I'm acting as an actress.
Right.
And
Wow.
I found that sort of quite profound for someone, particularly of that generation, to have
Yes.
the awareness of their limitation with material and how often, you know, particularly in a very male-dominated writing space, there hasn't traditionally often been great material for young female actors.
Right.
And
Right.
I felt I certainly sympathized, but couldn't empathize. I felt sort of frustrated by proxy on their behalf.
Yes. Yes.
And I was curious if that has ever been a pinch point for you, if that's ever been frustrating for you in terms of material sent your way. You mentioned obviously that you gravitated towards certain types of roles. Have
Yes.
there been moments where something has come across perhaps an agent's desk or put in front, indeed put in front of you, and you've looked at it and there's been maybe perhaps a hesitation slightly by the material you've been presented with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there can definitely be, as your so wise actress said, you want to play things that are affirming. It's certainly wonderful to
Right.
get to play something that's dark,
Yeah.
but you don't want to just be one color, right, on the page. So
Yeah.
it can be frustrating. And I think it's one of the reasons why I started writing. I have a partner that I wrote a script with
Oh, right.
specifically for that reason, because these are older women, these are women over 40, but even the young girl in our script is wants to play baseball, which I
Nice.
guess that what's
Right.
baseball for you guys? That's
Well, the closest, I mean,
is not,
I
yeah.
want to say cricket,
It's
but
but not,
but
yeah,
it's
but not really
not.
cricket,
And
but
also,
yeah,
I
sort
really
of.
don't feel like anyone British watching this. If I said rounders to the
They
softball, I guess would be probably the closest
Okay, softball.
match.
There you
Yeah,
go. That would
yeah.
be it. So
Everyone is
we
yelling at me right now about this. Who's watching this?
yeah. Well, that kind of character, you would expect, oh, maybe she would want to be I don't know, a fashion
Right.
person or
Yeah.
an influencer or something.
Hmm.
And so we're trying to, really open it up, because when people see themselves on screen, it helps them realize, oh yeah, there are other things out there, right? It's not
100%.
just the cliches that we see in
That's
different
it.
roles.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it was the frustration that they were expressing to me was the cliched nature of the material. And they
Yes.
found it just so predictable and trite and just
Yes.
things
Yeah.
that and also a cliche for a reason because it's been seen innumerable times
Exactly.
in various
Exactly.
forms, whether it's theatre, film, TV, etc. So
Yeah.
it's interesting you mentioned how, as a way to sort of like a 2% way to address that, write it yourself, write it yourself, become a good
Sure.
writer. So how did that become an opportunity? Was it literally just you going, you know what? I want to take a shot at this. I want to write. I want to just get this out
Yeah,
there.
I was in acting class with a woman by the name of Anna Author. We connected just as actors seeing each other work.
Right?
We spoke about this idea that we don't see ourselves on screen as much as we would like in complicated, interesting roles.
Right.
So we sat down, and having both worked for a long time in the business, we were not, we didn't have a degree in writing, but we had
Mm.
certainly read a lot of scripts and knew a story that we wanted to tell. So we wrote a script. It took 5 years. She lives
Oh,
in another
amazing though.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you literally like back and forthing drafts to each
Do
other?
you know, we were using Final Draft, which is the screenwriting program, and because she's in another city, you're able to see each other's screen.
Oh, amazing.
So we would
Nice.
pull up Final Draft, we would work on it, and then we started sending it out to festivals and ended up winning the jury award for Best Unproduced Script at a competition at Cannes called La Femme Independente. I'm sure I'm butchering that. My French is not what it should be.
Don't don't make
Um,
me.
yeah, independent, La Femme Independente, or something
No,
like that.
I talked about softball earlier. I'm not
Yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah.
that.
So yeah, so it's received a number of laurels, and we're now in the stage of trying to get it produced, and we want to be in the roles. We initially thought let's sell it, and
Sure.
then we just thought, let's try and be in it. So
100%. What an
that's the
exciting
stage.
opportunity that essentially fashioned for yourself there.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I mean that's I the story of Stallone selling Rocky, the original
Yes.
for Rocky, has
Right.
always been
Yeah.
something I've adored because he mandated, you want this, and the
Yes.
Paramount recognized its value. I'm starring in it, and he clearly
Yeah.
wasn't the first choice. He was an unknown. They were gonna,
Right.
but that there's a certain. It's almost like you give yourself the control. You give yourself the creative
Yes.
freedom because, and of course, now you've got the opportunity to leverage the fact that well, this has been recognized, right? You've earned
Yes.
stripes with it, right?
Yes.
And yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really what a fun arc for that project, despite the fact that it was
Yes.
like 5 years in the
I
oven
know.
cooking.
Well, and I think post pandemic and post the actors strike that we had
Mhm.
here for a number of months, I think there's a real sense of trying to create your own projects. I mean, that's always been something that people have wanted to do, but we really feel it in a very, let's get this done kind of way.
Nice.
And, even to the point of, I know you have a podcast that you created. Co-created a podcast with a friend of mine about classic cinema called From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. So it's
Awesome.
having all of these
Fantastic.
balls up in the air at the same
Yeah,
time. So you're writing, you're doing voiceover work, you're doing theater, you're doing on camera, you're doing a podcast, because it's kind of what is required
totally.
to
You keep
make
your
it
tool sharp.
happen.
You know what I mean? You keep your instrument
Exactly.
calibrated because you are just creating. And that
Yes.
that I know definitely speaks to what we've tried to create here, which is that in some ways, in much the same way where you sort of perhaps there was probably an inherent maybe like undercurrent of frustration with the
Yes. Yes.
that kind of born that script from that. I know that
Right.
we looked at the kind of conversations we wanted to have. This some drivel came from a place of just going, I don't need to produce these ad infinitum just for the sake of making a podcast. I just want to talk to people that are interesting. Like that,
Hmm.
that was fundamentally. And then ironically, if it's something that people connect with and they want to watch and they want to share, fantastic, that's the icing. But going
Yes.
into it without the sort of the intention of it becoming some huge multi-million subscriber, outlet, it's actually more about just can we create content that's evergreen, that will last, but it is interesting.
Right.
That for us first. You've made
Yes.
that script for you both first, and it
Right.
it has then connected. And actually, that again, you've helped me beautifully with my own segue here, which is great. Which
Oh,
is that
good.
I
I
wanted to
love
look
doing
ahead.
that.
No, it's really helpful. Thank you. I wanted to look ahead because given the varied arc of your career, which is fascinating to look through, just especially in terms of the kind of different projects that you've been involved with. If you were to look ahead now, we're fascinated by
Hmm.
legacy here too. We talk about that a lot with actors about sort of what they consider to be those sort of memorable moments in their career. What do they want to be known
Mm.
for? But I also like flipping that on its head a little bit and looking ahead. So is there something that I mean, that script notwithstanding, I mean, that definitely is going to be something clearly
Yes,
that's an iron in the
definitely.
fire. But
Yeah.
is there something, a sort of a particular project, or not necessarily that specific, but type of role that you've always wanted to play that you haven't, but we know that's kind of on your bingo card. That's something you always
Mm.
wanted to approach one day.
I would say I'm working on a play right now by a playwright, Lauren Gunderson, who actually has a connection to London at the Hampstead Theatre, I believe it
Wow.
is.
Okay. Cool.
And a play that she wrote that they premiered is being done here in Los Angeles. It's the North American premiere.
Yeah.
It's called Anthropology, and it's a beautiful play, powerful. It's really a thriller. She describes it as a thriller.
Fun.
And so while we're certainly working toward opening, which is October 4th, if you're in Los Angeles, come see us at the Matrix Theater, the Rogue Machine Theater. Um, I would have a dream of bringing that to off-Broadway because Lauren
Oh, amazing.
Gunderson's work has not been produced in New York, and she's the most produced playwright in the United States right now. And have your
That's nuts.
student look at her plays because her female characters are complex and interesting, and she writes a lot of younger characters as well.
Amazing.
Um, so that's a dream of mine. I would love to
Nice.
someday do a show
I love how
on
specific
Broadway
that
or
is
off
too.
Broadway.
That is something that clearly is
Yeah.
sitting there. Like that's really
Yes.
cool.
Yes. And then of course, I love working. I want to keep working. And I do, as you mentioned, I do a lot of different things. I do,
Yeah,
audiobooks and on camera. I would love to have the opportunity to be a regular on a television series. Mike White, uh, uh, Quinta Brunson, David E. Kelly, any of those
right.
folks. I'd love to have a scene with Ryan Gosling.
Hey,
Who
shoot for
doesn't
it.
want that, male or female, right?
Listen. My wife, I think, would agree if I could get a scene with Ryan Gosling, she'd be
Yes,
fine with it.
she'd
You
be
know what I
very
mean?
happy.
Yeah,
And then the other thing since we started with Gears,
yeah.
there is press out there right now that the director, David Leitch, who directed The Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling,
Mhm.
he's actually attached to
Circling
direct,
the franchise, isn't he? Yeah, I know you're right.
yes, the film version of Gears of War. So I think that all of the major characters, Anya and Marcus and
Marcus
Dom, I
Dom, and
think
yeah.
the actors who originated those roles should have some sort of lovely cameo in the
100%.
movie.
That is
Right?
the that is the lowest possible hanging fruit in terms of like
I
victory. You know what I
know.
mean? Like that is the if you just want to immediately make a fan base go, I'll watch that then. Get
Yes.
any of you guys, the original cast, to then pop in
Yes.
as a cog soldier. You could go down to the base and
Oh,
grab your weapon. You know what I mean? Like you
it,
could just
yeah.
like that. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
Like that. I
That
know. I
that would be
agree.
so fun. And
100%.
they've been talking about the film in various iterations for years. I think this one might actually happen. So, and I think he's a great director to do
Well,
it.
yeah, and
So,
actually, and I do sometimes find there's providence with that, isn't there? Like, even if you've got projects that have incubated and they're not panned out, when those
yes.
projects then in perhaps a new form, new production studio, or new directors attached, often the last version of that, it invariably we've seen some fantastic video game adaptations. The Last of Us HBO series being one of them.
Yes.
Sonic, of course, Sonic becoming really popular again, with the Jim Carrey trilogy. But often those last versions, if they've taken a minute
Yes.
to cook, they can be the one that was worth waiting for. I think the video game curse is broken now. For a long time, there had been a
Yes.
weird
Agreed.
stigma with video game adaptations, and now, if anything, like we're seeing time and again, studios wanting to double down on these games that are achieving, widespread. It's not niche anymore. I really don't think gaming particularly is, certainly for people that have
Agreed.
gotten into Gears, it's not a sort of like unusual pastime. It's very
Yes.
mainstream and very much in the lexicon. And
Yes.
I certainly, just hearing you say the notion of like, oh, please pitch us a cameo. Yes, please. That is a fantastic idea. Can we just make that happen? That would just be fantastic.
Well, and I think, you're talking about games translating well
Mm,
now to film. I think this one in particular has such the romance between
totally.
Marcus and Anya. Just and the real there's just a real arc to these
Yep.
characters
And
that
that's unusual
it
in a
is unusual. Yeah.
and especially, I think at the time too, we've seen games. I mentioned The Last of Us, but we've seen like Uncharted, God of War. We've seen games much more narratively driven than perhaps they were even just a
Yeah.
decade ago.
Right.
And Gears, in some ways, I think was a bit of a surprising outlier because
Yes.
at face value, I think it could be quite easily dismissed. I think you could look at a screenshot of the first Gears, see the browns and the greys, and the sort of gruff, big, broad-shouldered characters and shooting aliens. I think you could, at face value, if you didn't know anything about the context or didn't really see any of the cutscenes and story, it could be quite easily dismissed as just being another shooter. But actually,
Right.
there is the reason I think it has endured is because there was that narrative hook. There is those
I
things that people
agree.
connect with, right? It's
Yeah.
it's why those games, even things like Halo, another Xbox franchise, the story elements in that, even though they're quite minimal, there are those really memorable characters that gamers really attach themselves to
Right.
because
Right.
because they found ways to get you invested. And that I certainly think that speaks to a strength of Gears is that what you guys created there across, like you mentioned, the arc of those games, it got people invested in those stories.
I think so. And you see these big hulking characters and then you see them be vulnerable and
Yes.
emotional.
Yeah.
And you think, "Oh, this is a different game. This is a different world."
100%. Dom's sacrifice is what I think is one of the greatest
Yeah.
moments in gaming
Yeah.
history, which again, you could look at their relationship and just kind of go, oh, that's dude, bro. That's just the two of them just doing the
Yeah,
typical male, gruff personality.
right.
Completely subverted that. That,
Yeah.
that was brilliantly rug pulled there for on the audience.
Yes.
And but that again, that speaks to the fact that we've spent so much time with these characters. We spent so much time with Anya and Marcus and Dom that we have got to the point where we do actually care about their outcome.
Yes.
We get the prequel announced. We care about theing them again. There's a
Yeah.
reason why it was so well received because we've been made to invest. And that what a great problem to have, right? That you've got
Yeah,
people that
for
care.
sure. Yeah, I mean, and they've done a great job too with doing books in between,
Yeah.
before, in between one, two, three, four, that I've actually gotten to narrate. And,
I
you
didn't
know,
know that. So you've done the audiobook version of those
I've done the
tie-in novels.
audiobooks. And yes, and let me tell you, when
Awesome.
I get to do all the guys' voices,
That must be such a treat. You must have that must be just putty in your hand, right? That must be so much fun.
well, I did have to go back and just kind of go, okay, let's see, how can I do Marcus? Because, the actor that does Marcus, his voice is
John
just, I mean,
DiMaggio's voice is so gruff and
oh,
like
it's so gruff.
yeah.
It's so gruff. Yeah. So it's not, I can't mimic him clearly, but it was fun to
And I
get
had
to
no idea that you did that. That is
do
so
all of
cool. That is
those.
such a
Yeah.
great thing. Well, listen,
Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough for your candor and
Oh,
the way you've
so
spoken to this.
lovely to chat with you, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Really
this
a
has been
pleasure.
genuinely, this has been a treat. So thank you so much for giving up your time. Folks, you can follow us at Burly Bird Media on all of the things, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, as well as YouTube, Podbean, and Spotify, where episodes of our podcast go up every single week. You can also jump into our Discord community, which is a very much gears positive, but very positive place for you to hang out and come and interact with us. Nan, where can people find you? Like, have you got social media? Do you have any sort of website? Is there anything you can point people
Yes.
to?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Nan McNamara. That's McNamara. And I have a website, nanmcnamara.com.
Amazing. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning into this latest episode of Some Drivel, and we will see you next time.